Hey there, this is Natalie with more coverage of the Attack on Titan Chapter 138 leaks situation. Now, while we're not expecting any credible leaks until later this week, a supposed new leak did appear on Reddit today, which was posted on the Titanfolk subreddit by a user EmergencyTap600, and which supposedly was found in Japanese on the Baidu forum, and then polished up in the translation by the user. Now, this version of the chapter is very different from what we'll call the Twitter leaks, which have been around since early February, and which I've covered in another video. So I'm going to go through what they say will happen, and then we'll get onto how credible this is as a leak, and also some discussion of whether or not this would be a good way for Chapter 138 to go. So, the leak says the chapter is called Humanity's New Dawn, and it goes like this. The chapter starts with Zeke sinking into the path's sands after his death. He's confused and talks about a strange light on the other side. The next panels switch to the farm in Paradis, where Historia is finishing giving birth. The baby is born and Historia passes out, due to the tension. It's implied that the baby is Zeke and that he inherited the Beast Titan. Meanwhile, at Fort Salza, Muller shot into the sky and the fight between the Marleyans and Eldians stopped, and then he started talking about how those brave heroes, the Alliance probably, managed to put their differences aside and stop the rumbling. The warriors' parents are shown crying from happiness for being saved by their kids, and they start talking about how they would change the way they treated their kids in the past if they could. Meanwhile, Armin's colossal titan emerges from the founding titan's bones, and he's holding an injured Reiner in his hands. The chapter ends with Armin being brought to the paths, with Erin and Ymir in front of him. So the first thing I would say is very apparent about this potential Chapter 138 summary is it's very short. Yes, with a lot of time spent on the Marleyans and Eldians, it's possible it could be stretched out to a full-length chapter, but it really doesn't feel like very much happens here if there's only to be one chapter left. But at the same time, if this is what happens, it really means that we already had the climax in Chapter 137 fighting-wise, and now we're heading for an epilogue where Erin and Armin talk and stuff, I guess. This version of Chapter 138 would also mean that Historia's baby is supposed to be Zeke reborn, which would put an end to any theories that the baby was going to be Ymir reborn. And it would seem like it would make sense that the curse of Ymir hasn't been stopped, and the baby would still be cursed to only live to the age of 13. This would need to be addressed in Chapter 139 then, because it would be a bit weird for the final panel to be someone telling this baby that they're free now, if they're gonna die before they hit puberty. The translation we see here does refer to the baby as a he too, though this may be an inaccuracy in the translation. And that goes against a lot of people's expectations that Historia's child would be a girl, who she'd name Ymir after the 104th Training Corps Ymir. To me, it always kind of felt like having a character be named Ymir, even though an author wouldn't typically use the name for two completely separate characters to avoid confusion, was all one elaborate setup for Historia to name her child that. So it seems a bit weird for Isayama not to use that and to give Historia a son. But again, could be a translation thing, could be something Isayama set up and changed his mind about later, or could just be that the leaks are fake and not that much thought went into those kinds of details. The leak doesn't really tell us the fates of any of the Alliance, so we can assume there would be no deaths in this version of Chapter 138, but also no real developments towards any particular endings for characters other than Armin. And with just one chapter to go, it makes me suspicious that so little would be covered. We see the Eldians and Marleyans talking about their kids, but we don't even seem to get anything like a reunion between Annie and her father, which wouldn't be much, but would at least tie up one plotline. Instead, everything is left untouched upon, and this really makes me think that if anything about this leak is true, it is probably only a partial leak of Chapter 138, or it's based on someone having only a very quick look at the material and not being able to figure out or remember a lot of what happens. I think it's also worth noting that with all of the speculation about Attack on Titan Chapter 138, where the Twitter leaks have been around for a while, and the ending presented in those is admittedly pretty divisive, this would be the perfect time for someone who wanted to put out some hoax leaks to do it. It's just slightly before when we'd typically be expecting leaks, but close enough to get some attention on things. So really, anything that seems plausible is probably going to get discussed if it comes out and calls itself a leak during this period. I'm talking about these leaks because they're different to any other Chapter 138 theories or leaks I've seen or discussed already. And you never know, they could be true. And it could be that banking on the fan community seeing anything claiming to be a leak this way right now could be an incentive to put out fakes, if we're going to be really skeptical about things. However, while there are so many reasons I don't think this is a genuine, or at least complete leak, it does seem like a possibility for what could be in Chapter 138, just because it seems like a fairly natural follow-on from Chapter 137. There are no big twists, there are no new surprises. It's just really what you might expect the aftermath of the previous chapter to be if Isayama really had intended for that to be the end of the climax, with the rumbling stopped and peace beginning to form. And for that reason, I'm just going to say it, I think it would be disappointing for this to be the way Chapter 138 goes if this leak is real. I did cover the possibility of a happy ending in a previous video, but there I was still expecting that in the event of a Code Geass style ending, we'd still get to find out Eren's intentions in this chapter and have some conclusions to other characters' roles in things. Here we just basically get the Marleyans and Eldians talking, Historia's baby being born, and then a teaser that Armin and Eren will talk in the final chapter, and it just really lacks any particular drama. Unless you were that invested in Reiner's mother as a character. I know that those of us who like the idea of a more shocking type of ending, as presented in the Twitter leaks, and I am including myself in that, will probably feel a bit disappointed if there isn't some kind of big twist, and if Chapter 138 isn't going to be the real dramatic climax of the story. And I also know that the chances of those Twitter leaks being true are probably lower than with these ones, but I think at this point it's still reasonable to hold out hope that we'll get credible leaks in a few more days that will give us something a bit more exciting than this version of Chapter 138, even if the basic premise is going to be similar to this. Still, while I don't love this ending and find it a bit underwhelming, I would still say that it's not in the realms of a terrible ending to be outraged over. It's not especially thrilling, but it does make sense, and as long as Chapter 139 does a lot to tie up all of the loose ends that it fails to touch on, it could result in a reasonably satisfying, if not especially memorable, ending. Basically, while I'm hoping for something different and a bit more surprising, I don't think this ending would put Attack on Titan into Game of Thrones territory in terms of ending disappointment. It would be a competent ending from Isayama, if not exactly what a lot of fans might have hoped for. But what do you guys think? Do you think this supposed Attack on Titan Chapter 138 leak is likely to be true? How would you feel about this ending if it's the one we get? Let me know in the comments, and please consider subscribing, because I will be continuing to cover all of the latest developments with the Attack on Titan manga ending, plus I also have plenty of other anime, manga and light novel content, including lots of analysis and theories for ReZero. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again very soon.